Hey, all, my name is Jeff Nowak, WWL Digital Sports Producer. I'd like to thank you all for joining me today on the Week 17 Fall Football Preview brought to you by the Louisiana Office of Tourism. Get together in Louisiana and check out louisianahomecoming.com for more information. I'm going to bring you through the 3 games coming to WWL Radio this week, starting with the flexed out matchup with the Saints taking on the Carolina Panthers in what's become a must-win. I think that's a good way to put it, a must-win game for the Saints to have any ambitions to make the playoffs. Keep in mind, this is not a win and control your destiny game, at least not as things are set up right now, but it will be a win and put yourself in a much better situation, only needing a few things to break your way as opposed to a lot more. We'll get into that in a bit. We have 2 other matchups coming to WWL Radio this week. That'll be the Sunday Night Football matchup between the Vikings and the Packers, another big game for the Saints. We'll get into that. And then on Monday, you have Big Ben's Heinz Field send-off with the Steelers hosting the Browns. But okay, let's backtrack. Let's get into this Saints matchup. And what I wanted to talk about today wasn't so much Saints versus Panthers. We've seen this game. It's going to look a lot different than it did last time. You're not going to have Christian McCaffrey, but you will have Sam Darnold again. But I'm not going to get too much into the game itself. The Saints are heavy favorites, which, considering how the Saints looked that last week, even down 20 players, and how they've looked, losing 6 of the last 8 games, they're going into 6.5-point favorites. And that tells you a lot about what has gone on with this Panthers team as they have fallen off a cliff. They started the season 3-0. They have only won 2 of their 12 games since. So I'm not going to dive too much into that matchup, but I do want to lead you through some of the scenarios that could get the Saints to the playoffs. Because understanding the scenarios is important to understanding what to hope for as you watch some of these games, including that Vikings-Packers matchup that we're going to get into shortly. But I'm going to pop in a post that I put together this week, and we're going to go through it. First, you can see the standings there. They might be a little small, but as you can see, Packers are at the top. Then Cowboys, Rams, and Bucks over on the right side. That's the NFC side. Then you have the Cardinals, who have been leading the NFC West all season in that top 4 group, falling back behind the Rams. And that's another couple of teams that we're going to want to keep close tabs on. Keep that in mind. Keep going down the line. Obviously, you have Vikings 7-8, Falcons 7-8, Saints 7-8. Interestingly, the Saints have actually fallen behind the Falcons, despite the Falcons actually having worse odds to make the playoffs than the Saints. And the reason is the NFC records, which we'll get into. But we're only going to look at the scenarios where the Saints go 2-0 and how they can get in if they go 2-0. We're not going to look at 1-1 or 0-2 because the odds go down so drastically in that scenario that's not worth looking at. And so logic would dictate that if the Saints go 2-0, the Falcons cannot go 2-0. And the only way for the Falcons to make the playoffs would be to go 2-0. So we're only going to talk about the teams that might be in combination with the Saints in a tiebreaker. So just if are there Falcons fans watching, I'm sorry. You're going to have to go to something else to find out the Falcons scenarios. They are not good because of their 4-7 record against the NFC. That's going to do you in a lot of the time. And I think it's going to be what does the Falcons in here, even if they do go 2-0. But the Saints are in a bit better situation because it's about how they stack up with the 3 teams ahead of them, not including the Falcons, with the 49ers at 8-7, the Eagles at 8-7, and the Vikings tied with the Saints at 7-8. Okay, so you might be asking, do the Saints control their own destiny? The answer right now is no. The Saints do not control their own destiny. There are a lot of ways that the Saints could potentially get into the playoffs, but as far as I can tell, none of them will allow the Saints to control their own destiny before Week 18. There is even some weird scenario where the 49ers lose to the Texans, and the Saints are almost guaranteed a spot on and the Saints are almost guaranteed that if they win, they're in. But what it will do is open up a scenario where if the Vikings win out and the Saints end up in a 3-way tie with the Vikings, 49ers, and the Eagles get in, then the Saints miss out. So keep in mind, there's nothing the Saints can do this week to really take control of their destiny, but they can put themselves in the best position possible by winning and hoping that a few things come true. So let's first look at the tiebreaker order. The first tiebreaker is the head-to-head matchup, which the Saints only have one head-to-head matchup working in that scenario of the 4 teams, and that is the loss of the Eagles. So the Saints, in any scenario, do not want to end up in a head-to-head tie with the Eagles because they will lose based on that head-to-head matchup. Saints haven't played the 49ers or the Vikings, so it gets a little more complicated than that. And because of some of the Saints' wins and where they came, 2 against the Bucs and 1 against the Packers, they end up in pretty good tiebreaker situations if you get down the line, if you get past that head-to-head. They own the common games tiebreaker against the 49ers. The common games tiebreaker against the Vikings is still up in the air. If it gets further than that, assuming that everyone ends up tied in the NFC, it goes to that common games tiebreaker. And then if that is not definitive, it goes to strength of victory, which the Saints will dominate again because 4 of their 7 wins thus far have come against the Patriots, Packers, and twice against the Bucs. So they're going to end up in a positive scenario if any tiebreaker gets the strength of victory. But that's an uncommon tiebreaker to get to. So we're going to have to figure out how we get there. And that's what we're going to do here. Okay. What I did here was I put together a handful of the scenarios where the Saints finish 2-0 and get in. I didn't include scenarios where all 3 other teams go 0-2. I went basically 1-1 or 2-0. Because if any of these teams finishes 0-2, it completely changes the dynamic of so many things, and it's too early to get into that. We could probably get into more specific examples and really break down all of them heading into Week 18 when we know a lot of the variables that are going to shake out in Week 17. But for now, let's stick to the top end. Let's assume the Saints go 2-0, and let's look at how they can get in. And so here's the standings as they are now. So you have the Saints and Vikings at 7-8, and you have the 49ers and Eagles at 8-7. So the Saints need at least one of the 49ers or Eagles to lose so they can catch them, regardless of any tiebreaker. The Saints cannot get in the playoffs if the 49ers and Eagles go 2-0 because the standings will remain as they are now because the Saints and Vikings both need a loss at the top to catch up. Okay, definitive there. But what you can see is the NFC record, and that's going to be the tiebreaker that the Saints are hoping comes into play, and the Saints are hoping they can get a multi-team tiebreak out of. So you can see the Saints are 5-5 in the NFC. They have 2 games left. The best they can finish is 7-5. The good news is that only the Eagles have fewer than 5 losses in the NFC. Assuming the Saints win out, they're 7-5 in the NFC. And the good news is only the Eagles have fewer than 5 NFC losses. So assuming one of these losses comes for the 49ers, you're in good shape because if they lose Week 18 against the Rams, they're 6-6 in the NFC and the Saints would move past them. If they lose in Week 17 against the Texans, they're 7-5 in the NFC and you keep going down the line. But as we established, the Saints are in good shape if it keeps going down the line. The Eagles would need to lose one of their final 2 games, but the good news is they have both NFC matchups. So either game they could lose and it would bring the Saints even. Vikings, obviously, they would need to go 2-0 to match the Saints if they're 2-0, and they cannot finish better in the NFC. So that's a good situation tiebreaker-wise. So here's the first scenario where the Saints get in. Saints go 2-0, 49ers go 2-0. All right, so you've eliminated the 49ers from the equation because they're alone in the 6th seed. Vikings go 2-0, Eagles go 1-1. This is a scenario where of all these 4 teams, only one loses a game, and the Saints get in. Now, that would include a Vikings win over the Packers, which is, I would say, unlikely, and that is the key here, right? Because if the Vikings go 1-1 in this scenario, the Saints don't get in because they end up in a head-to-head tie with the Eagles, and they miss out. They would end up the 8th seed. But here, with the Vikings getting it, they would get in. And it's not as simple as it sounds because if the Vikings win and this is flipped and the 49ers go 1-1 and the Eagles go 2-0, then the Saints miss out from that Vikings win. So it's really difficult to say right now who you want to root for. And I would actually root for the Packers because if the Saints and Vikings end up in a head-to-head tie, the Saints will lose because that would mean the Vikings beat the Packers, took that common games tiebreaker, and that messes up a lot of stuff for the Saints. So even though this is a positive scenario, I would be more nervous going into Week 18 knowing that I needed an Eagles loss to a Cowboys team that might not have a lot to play for than I would a 49ers losing to the Rams, a team that probably will have a lot to play for. So, and it could go either way, right? If the 49ers end up facing a Rams team that has no incentive to play its starters, then that's trouble too. So it's really tough to gauge at this point. But let's go through a couple more scenarios of how they can get in. Here's this one. This is the other one that we were just talking about. The Saints go 2-0, 49ers and Vikings go 1-1. Eagles go 2-0. This is interesting because it puts the Eagles in at the 6 and it puts the Saints in over the 49ers. And any combination where the Saints go 2-0 and end up in a tie with the 49ers, they win that tiebreaker. So this is a good scenario to root for. right? You don't have to worry about the Vikings upsetting the Packers. You don't have to worry about whether the Cowboys have anything to play for. And you don't have to worry about the 49ers getting in that mix really weird. But you can root for a Rams team who has a very good chance to beat the 49ers. So I think this is probably the scenario that I'd root for. You end up here. If the Eagles lose, you're in a 3-way tiebreaker with the 49ers. And you just have to root for the 49ers to lose that Week 18 game. And I think that's the most likely scenario where the Saints benefit. Again, the Cowboys are running away with that division. They're only playing for seeding. Now, what I mentioned earlier is that and the Cardinals-Cowboys matchup is going to be huge because if the Cowboys win, they're already locked in the division. Nothing's going to change for them. And I think one way or another, you're going to see them throttle back a little. Even if they have some seeding to play for, I think you're going to have a hard time convincing me that you're going 100%. You're not thinking about wildcard weekend in Week 18. Now, if you're the Rams and the Cardinals win that game, that means that you have not clinched the division. And that means that while you are definitely in the playoffs, you're talking about going on the road in the wildcard round versus playing at home in the wildcard round in a division title, which matters to these guys. So I think I would much rather have the Rams needing to win that game to win the division than the Cowboys maybe sort of having some seeding to play for. And I don't want to have to wait until Week 18 and say, I hope the Cowboys care enough to win this game. That's just my opinion. So I'm rooting for the Packers over the Vikings. I am rooting for the Cardinals over the Cowboys. And it doesn't really matter what happens to the 49ers this week. And that's probably a good thing because I could not, in good conscience, suggest that anyone get emotionally invested in the Texans beating the 49ers. I don't care what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't care who starts at quarterback. The Texans are a horrible football team. I'm just going to say it. And I'm not going to advise anybody to feel like, man, we really need this Texans team to pull out a win. I know they did it last week against Seattle. It's a much different situation against a team that's fighting for its playoff life. And while, go ahead, watch that game, I'm not going to be responsible for your time. I just can't do it. I can't do it. So anyway, that's where I stand here. Here's another one. Saints go 2-0. 49ers, Eagles, Vikings all go 1-1. So as you can see, this is the 3-way tie with the Eagles, Saints, and 49ers, and that would put the Saints at the 7. You have another one here, which ends up being a 4-way tie, which is kind of interesting. All 4 teams end up at 9-8. So, and it's not that hard to see happening, right? You have the Saints going 2-0, 49ers going 1-1, Eagles going 1-1, Vikings going 2-0, right? And that's another scenario where, that Vikings-Packers game, while I'm rooting for the Packers, if it goes the other way, and then the Saints get this other combination, which is, 49ers beating the Texans and losing to the Rams, Eagles beating Washington, losing to the Cowboys, or losing to Washington and then beating the Cowboys, then the Saints actually get the 6th seed. So, the good news is that there are a lot of different combinations that could go the Saints' way. The bad news is that we don't really know how we want to root until it happens. And the nice thing is, by the time the Packers-Vikings game rolls around, which is the Sunday night game, you'll already know a lot of this information. The Monday night game is Steelers-Browns. So by the time the Vikings-Packers game gets here, we'll have a better idea of who we want to win that game, right? Because if both the 49ers and the Eagles win, I'm rooting for the Packers. I want to get to Week 18 knowing that I only need a 49ers loss and a Saints win to get in the playoffs. That's what I want. That's the scenario I want. And Packers winning is the easiest way to get there. That's just my opinion. But I think, the math would back me up too. Anyway, I went through a few of what if the Saints go 2-0? How can they miss? Here's an example. Eagles go 1-1, Vikings go 1-1, 49ers go 2-0. Because again, that would put the Saints in a 3-way tie with the Eagles and the Vikings, which would keep them out. Here, obviously, if the other two teams go 2-0, if the 49ers and Eagles go 2-0, Saints can't get in. And and so if you want to go check this article out, I can link it in the description. It breaks down a lot of these scenarios, and that's kind of where I land. I also got to break down the results I'm looking for, which you can see here. Saints over Panthers, Cardinals over Cowboys, Ravens over Rams, Washington over the Eagles, and Packers over the Vikings, right? And so that's what you have. And I'll pop that down. I'll link it in the description. Make sure to check it out. But as you can see, while the Saints losing to the Dolphins in one of the most embarrassing displays of the NFL, not even listening to its own directions and instructions, or precedent. While it hurt the Saints' chances and it took away their ability to control their own destiny over the last 3 weeks, it did not eliminate, a lot of the routes that they would have had either way because it was an AFC matchup. But again, the last 2 games, massively important. Saints can get in at 8-9, but I'm not going to break down the scenarios at 8-9 because if it falls 8-9 and you have to back in, there's so many things that have to go right, and it's not worth breaking down until next week anyway, even if it happens. But okay, that's the end of my diatribe on how the Saints can get into the playoffs, which again, they have about a 40% chance to do. Okay, the game's going to be at 3:25. It was flexed out of the noon slot. They announced that on Monday without announcing anything regarding, hey, we're not going to postpone this game. Mickey Loomis said he knew pretty early in the week, that it would not be postponed. And, the plan was play no matter what, is what he said. And, the NFL does what the NFL wants. And I think we should probably not expect any games to be postponed the rest of the way if that's what they're going to do. And if they do postpone games the rest of the way, it is going to look very, very slanted away from the Saints. Whether they care, who knows? But that's just how I see it. Anyway, but we're going to go through the last couple matchups coming to WWL Radio, AM 870, FM 105.3. You can check the call with Deuce McAllister and Mike Haas starting at 3:25. You got the pregame show about 2 hours before that. And we'll also be doing a live chat on YouTube and Facebook with yours truly. Make sure to tune in. Now, keep in mind, one of the reasons I mentioned that it was flexed out of that noon slot, the 3:25 p.m. start means that the Saints post-game show will cut into the start of Sunday Night Football. So if you're looking for Sunday Night Football, which is the Vikings at the Packers, you obviously will have to wait until the end of that post-game show, about 2 hours after the end of the game. So you'll join that game in progress sometime in the first half. But keep in mind, if you tune in and it's still the post-game show, that is not a mistake. That is by design. It's just what has to happen when the Saints play at 3:25 and the Sunday Night Football comes on. But again, that's Vikings-Packers. You have the number 1 seed in the NFC, but they are facing a Vikings team that has already beaten them once and is playing with a lot of playoff desperation. The Packers will not have any incentive to rest players because they are still right in line for that number 1 seed in the NFC and the only bye in the conference. The NFL eliminated the second bye last year. So there's only one bye to be had. They are a game clear, which means that they still have to keep winning. So they're going to be going all out. If they win next week, there is a chance that they clinch the bye in the first seed. So if anything else, this is going to be a Packers team all in on taking this game and potentially getting themselves 2 weeks of rest for anyone who needs it. And that will be a massive advantage while also knowing that they will not have to play on the road through the NFC Championship. So obviously that's a big game for both teams. One of the reasons I'm also reticent to say root for the Vikings is I do not give them much of a chance in that game. But you never know. They took the first game of that series. They don't have a chance in the division, but they have a significant chance to make the playoffs. So that's another interesting one. Obviously, it's going to start at 7:20 p.m. over on NBC. You can listen to it. You're going to have to join in progress after the Saints post-game show on WWL AM 870 FM 105.3. The final game of the week, not exactly a postseason barn burner, but you will have the Browns visiting the Steelers. And this is a significant game, mainly because it's probably Big Ben's final game at Heinz Field. There's going to be some emotion there. It's always interesting to watch. The last time he's ever going to see the home fans after, more than a decade in the NFL. He was part of that 2004 draft class with Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers. And he won 2 Super Bowls there. It's significant, whatever your thoughts are on Ben Roethlisberger. But, this season, it's probably not going to matter much. The AFC standards are clogged just like the NFC standings. And while the Steelers still have a chance, the Browns still have a bit less of a chance. Odds are neither of these teams are going to get in. The Dolphins are currently holding that last spot. But the Steelers, while there's a bunch of teams at 7-7, while there's a bunch of teams at 8-7, 7-8, they do slot in kind of a weird situation because they have a tie. If they get to 9-7-1, they might have a chance. But, this matchup, while it's going to be a lot about Big Ben, in kind of the year after all the quarterbacks retired, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, they hung it up last year. This year, it's Big Ben. Eli obviously retired a few years back. But the winner of this matchup is probably the only one of the two that still retains a chance to get in. I haven't gone through the playoff scenarios on that side. They're just as wonky. The playoffs or the tiebreaker scenarios at the top of the NFC are also wonky. You have the Packers 12-3, and then you have 3 11-4 teams. You could end up with a 4-way tie for the bye and the 1 seed. It's nuts. But again, this is Jeff Nowak, WWL Digital Sports producer. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. I'd like to thank you for tuning in again. This is the Week 17 Fall Football Preview brought to you by the Louisiana Office of Tourism. Get together in Louisiana and check out LouisianaHomecoming.com for more information. We'll see what happens. Saints, Panthers, 3:25 p.m. on Sunday. Saints still alive in the playoff hunt. Got to figure it out. We'll see what happens. Thanks, y'all. Who dat? And peace.